On behalf of the UN Global Compact, and especially our human rights and business and peace work streams, we're really delighted to welcome everyone to this webinar. We thank you very much for joining us from a variety of time zones for this topic on the rule of law and business, an example in Myanmar. My name is Ursula Weinhoven, and I'm the Chief Governance and Social Sustainability here at the UN Global Compact, and I'll be moderating this webinar. We have a terrific panel for you today, which I will introduce in a few moments. But first, I wanted to give you some context on why we are having a webinar on the rule of law and business. On 19 September of this year, the UN Secretary General Ban Ki-moon announced a new initiative on the rule of law and business. This initiative builds on important work that LexisNexis and the Atlantic Council have undertaken to mobilize the private sector in this area. The UN Global Compact has been asked to carry forward this effort with LexisNexis and the Atlantic Council as founding members of a multi-stakeholder steering group, which is in formation. You'll be hearing more about this in the weeks and months to come. The focus of the initiative is to raise the awareness of the global business community of the value of the rule of law and opportunities to help support the rule of law in businesses' self-enlightened interest. All societal actors, including the private sector, must comply with the law, of course, and respect the administration of justice. But they can also take proactive action to help support and strengthen the rule of law as a complement, but not substitute for governmental action. Our preliminary research has already turned up dozens and dozens of examples of how businesses around the world are engaged in this activity. We hope that these examples, like the ones that you'll hear more about on this webinar today, can serve as inspiration for other businesses. After the panel makes their remarks, you'll have the opportunity to ask questions and to make comments. And we'll just shoot across to the agenda right now. First, we will hear from Giovanni Basu from the Secretary General's Rule of Law Unit here at the UN. Then we will have Gayatri Raymond from LexisNexis, followed by Arlene Glazer from Coca-Cola, and then Patricia van Nispen from Microjustice for All. And during the comment period, you'll also hear about the Business for Peace platform from our colleague in the Global Compact, Adrienne Gades. If we can just go back one slide, I just wanted to highlight how it is that you can ask questions and comments, because you don't need to save that to the end. You can insert them into the question pane, which you should have, I believe, on the right-hand side of your screen. So feel free to make note comments or questions and shoot them over to us, and then we'll also send them to the panelists so that when we open up for discussion, we can get right onto those. If you do experience any technical difficulties, you can also, as indicated there, type your message so that we can hopefully help you that way. So without further ado, Giovanni, over to you. We'll just pull up your slide now. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ursula, and thanks a lot for taking this great initiative to you and the Global Compact. It's great to have you leading this. Maybe I can start with a brief look at what we in the UN mean and understand by the rule of law. Now, this is actually quite a difficult issue. There's been many, many discussions on what the rule of law is. There's been many definitions preferred. I mean, very broadly, there are those that endorse what you can call a thin definition. That is what is probably more known as a rule by law, which is just having a system of laws that is enforced without necessarily having much normative or many of the normative standards that we would normally include. There is also a competing kind of concept, which is that of a thick definition of rule of law, which is really where the UN stands on this, and that is a rule of law that includes a lot of the normative and human rights standards that we stand behind. Now, whilst there's no real member state approved definition of the rule of law, I think our member states came very, very close to this at last year's high-level meeting, and you'll see it on your slides. They basically said that the rule of law is a principle of governance whereby all persons, institutions, and entities, public and private, including the state itself, are accountable to just, fair, and equitable laws, and are entitled without any discrimination to equal protection of the law. I mean, that is very close to the Secretary General's working definition. The Secretary General had kind of elaborated on this a bit more and kind of specified that laws had to be publicly promulgated, which adds a democratic element, equally enforced and independently adjudicated, and very importantly had stressed that all laws had to be consistent with international human rights norms. The Secretary General had also stressed that the rule of law needed the principles of supremacy of the law, equality of the law, accountability to the law, fairness in the application of the law, separation of powers, participation in decision-making, legal certainty, avoidance of arbitrariness, and procedural and legal transparency. That was a bit of a mouthful for member states to all agree on, so they agreed to the slightly more abbreviated, but I believe no less important definition which you have on your slide. If we could have the next slide now. So with those definitions in mind, maybe we could have a quick look at how the rule of law works within the UN. And very broadly, we can say that the rule of law is a cross-cutting issue for us. The work of the UN is organized around 3 pillars. The first pillar is peace and security, the second pillar is human rights, and the third pillar is development. And we believe that the rule of law supports all of those 3 pillars and is very intimately linked to all 3. Within the UN, the rule of law was first discussed in the context of human rights, and first made its appearance actually in 1993 in the Vienna Human Rights Conference, and it was very much tied to a delivery mechanism for human rights. That is, how do you ensure that human rights are domesticated and implemented at the national level through rule of law institutions and through a strong rule of law culture where state institutions can be held accountable to any breach of their obligations to their citizens. In 2005, we had a big world summit here at the UN, and there the links with peace and security as well as with developments were also made. Now the discussions on rule of law at the UN happen in the 6th Committee of the General Assembly, who discuss this annually and adopt kind of annual resolutions. This all came to a head with last year's high-level meeting, and I encourage you to have a look at the declaration that was adopted. You can find it on our website. That's www.rol.un.org. Now, I should mention quickly also that not only the General Assembly works with the rule of law, but the Security Council also works with the rule of law, and now pretty much routinely includes a strengthening rule of law mandate in all of its peacekeeping missions. I'll discuss this a bit more later, but that generally means that there has to be priority and there is money for strengthening the criminal justice chain in the post-conflict countries that we work in. The Security Council obviously has also been instrumental in pushing for accountability for serious international crimes and created what we know as the ad hoc international criminal tribunals, the ones for the former Yugoslavia and for Rwanda. So maybe if we could move to the next slide. And I will rest a little bit now, because I believe it's an important issue, on the link between the rule of law and development. And I'm not sure how much you are aware, but there's many discussions currently as we come to the end of the Millennium Development Goals. These were 8 development goals that were crafted in year 2000, and they were supposed to be achieved by 2015. As we move, the 8 goals or Millennium Development Goals that were agreed were very much a mainstay of traditional development. You can look them up. They included education. They included health. Now we're coming to we're nearing to 2015, and there are discussions on what is going to happen after 2015. What is the new development framework going to look like? And one of the recurring issues that has been arising is, well, what is the place of human rights, the rule of law, government, some of the not-so-traditional development issues, but that we believe really further any sustainable development. So the discussions about how the rule of law, well, first of all, if the rule of law, and then how the rule of law would fit into this framework has been an issue that has been much discussed. And we at the UN are advocating that, as you can see in the slide, the rule of law furthers inclusive growth, economic growth. It reduces inequalities, and it builds institutions that ensure participation and delivery of public services. And that includes, obviously, providing access to justice for all. I have to stress that this is really an important agenda, including for Myanmar and for the role of business in Myanmar. Whatever is agreed in the post-2015 development framework is obviously going to attract a share of ODA, that's Overseas Development Assistance, and also will engender, I believe, especially as the development agenda is moving away from aid dependence and more towards sustainable trade, it's going to attract a lot of government support for the private sector in this area. And I really hope that you can get involved in these discussions and you can make your voice heard. From our end, we've got an online platform to try and attract the voices of as many stakeholders as possible. I will send out the link at the end of this webinar, but I would really encourage you to participate and let us know how, from your perspective, from business, you believe that the rule of law can further development. Maybe we could have the next slide, and I will very briefly address what we in the Secretariat now do to strengthen the rule of law. And we've been doing this for many, many years. As you can see from the slide, we work in over 150 member states. This includes the many contexts, from development to conflict and post-conflict and peace building. And you see a few more statistics there. 3 or more United Nations entities engaged in the rule of law in at least 70 countries, and 5 or more are involved in over 25 countries. We've got about 10 to 15, depending how you count, UN entities working to strengthen the rule of law. And in short, really, we work whenever a government asks us to assist them in strengthening the rule of law, or whenever the Security Council mandates this to us. We generally work on the principle of national ownership. However, we do we have to ensure that our normative standards, our human rights standards, are also well embedded and respected in whatever frameworks we developed. We have begun to work in Myanmar. UNDP has just begun discussions with the Ministry of Justice on a strategy, a nationwide strategy to strengthen the rule of law. So hopefully the UN will be able to provide support now in Myanmar in strengthening the rule of law. If we could have the next slide. And just very briefly, you will see examples of some of the activities that we undertake to strengthen the rule of law. At the international level, we push for the codification and development of international law. The Secretary General is a depository of over 550 treaties, and the General Assembly and the International Law Commission of the General Assembly have prepared the basis for many international agreements and conventions. As I mentioned before, we have set up international courts and tribunals, whether through the Security Council or the General Assembly, in the former the Republic of Yugoslavia, for Rwanda, but also in Sierra Leone, in Cambodia. Many of our agencies work to strengthen legal frameworks, so provide legislative assistance depending on their mandates. So obviously the Office of Human Rights will do so for human rights standards. UNDP will do so on a broad range of issues. UNODC will do so on drugs and crime frameworks. UN Women will obviously push the gender-sensitive aspect of legislation. And most of our peacekeeping operations, as I said, work to strengthen the criminal justice chain. That is, work to professionalize the police, to strengthen justice institutions, and to work with corrections. Our Office of Human Rights takes the lead in pushing for transitional justice and in providing support to transitional justice mechanisms. That involves setting up commissions of inquiry at the international level, but also pushing to have serious abuses of human rights addressed through the criminal courts, as well as with truth and reconciliation commissions, reparations, and other work. We have much experience in constitution making. Our Department of Political Affairs and UNDP work to design very inclusive constitutional review processes, but also can provide support on technical issues. And finally, we work for the promotion and protection of human rights. I know that I'm running slightly out of time, so maybe if we move to the next slide, I'll wrap up with how the rule of law supports business and business can support the rule of law. I mean, ultimately, a strong rule of law will offer the most fertile environment for most businesses to succeed in country. How does it do that? You'll see from the slide. It provides for the protection of land, property, and other resource use rights. It obviously works for the enforcement of contracts and for the protection of contracts through fair and transparent courts. It regulates labor, and it provides opportunities for decent employment. It provides for the protection of small and medium-sized enterprises. It enforces the fair trade rules and equal access to markets. It assures transparency, predictability, and accountability in business transactions. And finally, it ensures an independent and impartial court system for the resolution of disputes and the protection of contracts. So I very much think that there is a strong business case for strengthening the rule of law and for providing a fair, rule-based environment to invest and trade in for business. I will stop there. We're happy here in the unit to take any questions that you have. And thank you very much, Ursula, again, for the opportunity to contribute to this.
Thank you so much, Giovanni. And before we transition to our remaining speakers on the webinar, who are all from business, I just wanted to add that clearly, as Giovanni mentioned, the rule of law is a key part of the enabling environment in which business operates, from the ability to make and enforce contracts to fair, timely, transparent, and predictable resolution of disputes. And what we've found in preliminary research is that there's already so many businesses around the world who are taking action in support of the rule of law. And so what we have on these slides are a few of the examples. So it ranges from core business areas, such as the examples that LexisNexis and Microjustice for All will share on this webinar, strategic social investment or philanthropy, such as the example you see here from the company Total. And then on the next slide, public policy engagement and advocacy, such as the examples here from GE and Microsoft, and partnerships and other forms of collective action, such as the example here from the Corporate Law Project. As I mentioned, these are just a few of the many examples that we've gathered thus far. So we're very, very encouraged that business seems to be very interested in what can be done to help strengthen the rule of law. So we also hope that if you're aware of other examples, or if your business has other examples, that you'll share them with us, either during this discussion period or email afterwards. So Gayatri, over to you. Could you share with us what are the needs and opportunities to help support the rule of law that you've seen on your visits to Myanmar?
Sure. Thank you, Ursula. I mean, I'll start with saying that we are really, really excited to be working with the UN Global Compact on many, many other long-term initiatives to advance the rule of law and support businesses in doing so as well. And what I'm going to share with everyone today is a simple example of, practical, on-the-ground, what happened in Myanmar and how, businesses just like LexisNexis and everyone else can just do similar things as well. Next slide, please. What happened was I visited Myanmar in August at the invitation of Daw Aung San Suu Kyi. What LexisNexis does is we provide content, so we publish the laws, we provide and provide access to laws to the legal community. So we support the legal community. That's our what we do, and underlying that is our purpose, which is to advance the rule of law. And Daw Aung San Suu Kyi, being the chair of the Parliamentary Rule of Law Committee in Myanmar, realized this. Her country, Burma, is going through reform process and is venturing into democracy, and it's an exciting time for everyone, and everyone wants to get it right. So there's a really, really good vibe there. There's a really, really good sense of energy there. There's a lot of investment going in, and everyone involved within the country realizes that investment needs a lot of stability as well, and it needs the assurance that the country will be able to sustain rule of law as well, and that would encourage more investment. She said this really well, that's why I put that quote here. She says, without rule of law, Burma will not attract the level and quality of foreign investment required to drive her development, which is really, really true. And this is what she said during her acceptance speech for the Latin Sex Rule of Law Award in September this year. I met with her in August, and she was very, very keen on building capacity for the legal community. We all realize that in a legal community such as Burma, they haven't been exposed to laws as someone like me from Malaysia would have been, for example. So what she wanted was for that knowledge to empower her people. We also talked about supporting Parliament. How do we support the constitutional reform process? How do we build a legal community that is strong and who will be able to support and drive rule of law across the country as well? This is really, really important, and an organization like LexisNexis was positioned to do that, because this is what we do day in, day out as well. That was a really, really fruitful meeting. We discussed what we could contribute. It wasn't something really, really complicated at all. We realized that we could start step by step and help as well. So in the next slide, I will explain what we did. Next slide, please. So we started with legal education, law schools. That is really, really important as well. They wanted to build a new curriculum. They wanted to strengthen the legal profession, but they also wanted to ensure that legal education was of a proper standard in the country. So what we wanted to do was also to use our connections to help them connect to the outside world. Our customers, our partners are, law schools in the Hong Kong University, the National University of Singapore, the Singapore Management University, for example. So as you can see in the pictures here, they need resources. They also need knowledge sharing exercises. They need to be exposed to what's going on in other Commonwealth countries as well. They would like to see what other law schools' curriculums are like. And this is something that we could do. This is something that we could do easily. So what we did was connect them to all these different universities and law schools. They've already exchanged, information and plans about what to do next year. All three universities have planned trips, and I think one of them has already gone there, sent a team there as well, and that was great. The universities right now, the law schools in Yangon can just exchange information, and that can live a life of its own as well. We don't need to be micromanaging everything. It was something very simple that can help, and we will be able to see fruits of this in the coming years as well. Next slide. Something else that we did, which was very, very useful, was also assist in Parliament. Again, this is a fledgling democracy. As you can see in the top picture, this particular Parliament is the newly built building. It is one of the largest parliamentary buildings in the world. But infrastructure alone isn't enough. They need resources as well. We donated a huge shipment of primary and secondary legal publications to the library. We know that they reference Indian laws, they reference British laws as well, and our UK office donated cartons and cartons of books to the Parliament Library. We also conducted a legal research workshop to 60 parliamentary MPs. What was important to these MPs was that they are debating bills. This is a new process for them. This is democracy. They are debating many, many bills which come to them, and they need to know, compare different laws of different countries. They need to know what kinds of questions they can ask. They need to know whether they are comfortable with what is, put before them. And they need to know that they can ask questions. They can question what is put before them as well. All this is new, very, very exciting to them, but they need context as well. So what we did was we conducted a workshop explaining to them that here, there are tons of other laws across the world that you can reference. You can also read, you can also take a look at what's going on around the world, and then make informed conclusions, and then ask the right questions, and then you'll be able to effectively debate bills and effectively go through the parliamentary process. That was something that we could do as well, and that we did back in August. Next slide. What we also did was this time we worked with the legal profession. So we started off with the law schools, with academia, then we went to parliament, lawmakers, and now this time we worked with the legal profession. Prior to August 2013, Myanmar did not have a national bar or a lawyers association. They had across the different states, many different state bars, and what they wanted to do was form a national bar. And the legal profession would serve as a really strong check and balance, and they are the ones who practice law and will be able to support businesses and represent businesses effectively in the effective legal system as well. And these are our customers, our partners, and we wanted to assist with training and capacity building as well. At the same time, there's a huge constitutional reform process going on in the country right now. Everyone is talking about where the Constitution is right now at its state today, where it needs to be in order to achieve proper democracy, for example. So there's a really healthy discussion going on about the Constitution, and we wanted to assist in that process as well. So we got 100 lawyers across the country. We worked with the Myanmar Lawyers Association. We got them together in a room. We had a one-day workshop where we discussed, we debated, we talked about the existing constitution. We shared what other constitutions of the other countries and other jurisdictions were about as well. All of them, were broken into groups. They were given tools. This was the trainers workshop. We wanted to introduce them to debate, discussion. They weren't really used to that. It was amazing to see, their eyes light up. It was amazing to see them enjoy debating with each other, and they were great. If you can see on the pictures, there's equal representation of men and women in the legal profession, and that's amazing to see, and that's great. All of them were given tools to conduct similar workshops on their own. The aim was that these 100 people would learn enough and be comfortable enough and be empowered enough to take what they've learned and conduct their own workshops and pay it forward as well, so that more people in the country would understand what it means to be able to know the law, to know the Constitution, to be able to discuss it, debate it, and say, this needs to change, this doesn't need to change, this will protect us, our people, well enough. And what happened post that particular workshop, one-day workshop, was all these lawyers got together and they went on their own constitutional awareness bus tour. And they went across multiple cities within 1 week, 2 weeks, and that was amazing. They went and did that on their own, which means they were inspired to do this on their own accord. What I'm saying is that a little bit of practical assistance and practical support in terms of advancing the rule of law can spark many projects beyond that, and can really help a specific country as well. And that's something that any business can do. And what we hope to do is to inspire more of our businesses within LexisNexis to do it in many other countries that we do business, as well as inspire those who are listening today and beyond to do the same. So that's all I have, and I'll be happy to take questions after this as well.
Thank you so much, Gayatri, for those examples of how LexisNexis is working with the rule of law in Myanmar. Arlene, over to you. Why is the rule of law and good governance a priority for Coca-Cola, and what actions have you been taking in Myanmar?
Thank you very much. First, I'd like to say it's an honor and a privilege to be here to talk about this exciting topic, and always to share best practices through the UN Global Compact. Our story in Myanmar is a really interesting one and a very exciting one. I guess I will start by saying that one thing about how the Coca-Cola Company approaches any place around the world that we operate is that we have a strong commitment to have good governance in place every place we operate. And that takes the form of, we have one single set of global standards that are embedded in each of our company operations. And you may want to go to the next slide. Thank you. So that takes the form of, we have one code of business conduct, for example, that lays out expectations for our employees around the world in areas like dealing with the government, dealing with the company and the company's assets, and dealing with external business partners. So we have one set of principles, value-based principles, that applies to all of our operations globally, from our new operation in Myanmar to our most senior executives here in the worldwide headquarters in Atlanta. And so that sense of commonality that was born out of, obviously, the framework of global standards and global law guides our actions, and allows us to be very clear with associates about those expectations. In addition, we have a very centralized governance process that ensures not only consistency in rules or expectations or policies, but also how those are brought to life and administered fairly across all of the places we do business. Particular to our decision to reinvest and re-enter Myanmar after a 60-year gap is building on this strong commitment for good governance, but also coming to the table, as we do everywhere really, with a strong commitment to generate long-term positive economic impact, and also think about how we can most assuredly build a sustainable community. And that takes the form, in this particular example, of the company is planning to invest about $200 million over the first 5 years of operations. We anticipate creating around 22,000 jobs. And as we started, one of the things we put a lot of focus on was also developing an initiative to support women's empowerment. And since July of 2012, it has already impacted about 15,000 women and should impact about 25,000 women by the end of 2015. So really thinking about not only is this a good business opportunity, but how can we do good business in Myanmar and everywhere we operate. The process of reentering Myanmar started with some really solid assessment, due diligence, and analytics of the local environment, and levering that against our policies, procedures, and requirements. The key areas we looked at were obviously legal issues, ethics and compliance issues, environmental stewardship, and human rights. Our journey started first by looking to identify the best local partner we could, and we found a local bottler who really brought to the table not only the commercial capabilities we needed, but also the ability to adopt some of our compliance and governance requirements successfully. We started out as well by sending senior subject matter experts in core governance areas to Myanmar to visit with the partner and to also perform some initial risk assessments in areas like land rights and legal issues and human rights and environment, so that and anti-corruption efforts as well, so that we could really start to understand and focus on how we would implement our policies and where we might need to, from the get-go, put solutions in place to close any gaps that might exist. Because many of our policies, for example, our human rights policies, find their foundation in the UN Business and Human Rights Guiding Principles, the Foreign Corrupt Practices Act, and the kinds of global standards that you would expect. And so obviously many of these were new expectations for the local operation. And so that initial risk assessment served as an awareness-generating opportunity, as well as an opportunity to really take our framework and get very practical about how we would bring it to life post-closing. And we identified initially some early areas that we would begin to put mitigation plans in place. Because the sanctions from the U.S. government were dropped as a part of Myanmar being opened for operations, one of the things we did obviously was take a look at the existing customers and suppliers that our business partner on the ground had to make sure that all of them were clean and not listed on the sanctioned parties list. We took a look at some of the work practices that were in place. And for example, sometimes it's simple things like we identified a need to make sure that when job descriptions were posted for openings, that they were not specific as to gender, but were specific as to what the needs of the role were. And we also, of course, did a very robust screening to understand the environment in terms of things like facilitating payments. The company's core anti-bribery policy has a prohibition against facilitating payments. Obviously, in a country like Myanmar, which is evolving and its standards of law are evolving, there were practices across the country where those kinds of small payments to move things along were not uncommon. And we identified some opportunities to put some practices in place to end that practice and educate our employees and arm them with a set of principles and tools to make that easier. And all of these efforts we went through have been summarized in what will be our first report to be filed with the U.S. State Department on responsible investment in Myanmar. Next slide. So I've just talked a little bit about sort of the approach to, we're going into this country, how do we approach it, how do we ramp up? Now I want to talk a little bit about post-closing, how we brought the company's commitment to good governance and consistency in expectations to life. One of the things that obviously was most important is to make sure that we made it very clear to employees what those guidelines were, where those guideposts were. So almost at a very tactical level, one of the first things we did was ensure that all of our core governance and compliance tools and documents were translated into local language. That included embedding them in the employee handbook in local language, but the kinds of tools I'm talking about are the company's Code of Business Conduct. We have a workplace rights policy that deals with fairness and good treatment of employees in our own workplaces. We have a supplier guiding principles policy, which sets similar expectations for how workers are treated in our supply chain with our business partners. We have a supplier code of business conduct, which sets similar expectations to our code of conduct for our business partners, because we want to make sure that our high commitment to doing business the right way is consistent and clear across our value chain. Our anti-bribery policy was translated. In addition to that, some other practical tools that we put in place is we have a screening process for any partners who are going to interface with the government that we put in place. We put as well a hotline for questions and concerns locally in place. And we had that website translated into local language, and we ensured that there was interpretation services so someone could call toll-free in the local market. Once we had all those tools in place, one of the things we did was we held training and awareness sessions. First for the management team, because it would be their accountability to bring this to life every day and make doing business the right way a priority. And we trained them on things like our Code of Business Conduct, our anti-bribery policy, and integrity leadership, and the workplace rights policy. In addition, we held sessions for our suppliers and our distributors and trained them on our supplier code of conduct as well as our supplier guiding principles. Again, to make sure that we laid out very clearly what our partners could expect from us and what we expected in turn from them. One of the other things we did was very clearly have management own this governance framework. So tone at the top, as you all know, is a very critical success factor in any compliance effort. And so management took a stand about wanting to do business the right way in Myanmar. And so if you take something as simple as the need to ensure that facilitating payments aren't made, it was very important, not for me when I visited as a corporate employee to say, here's the company's global policies, but to click that down as well and have the local business leaders say, this is important to me and this is how we're going to run the business. And we need to plan and be thoughtful as we think about getting permits or customs or other interactions with the government, and make sure that we plan adequately so that we have the time for things to go through the local process. Additionally, in that messaging was very important to create a safe environment for employees and others to share any concerns they have. That would include grievance mechanisms on the human rights side, as well as we have a global hotline we call Ethics Line, As I mentioned, that is available through the web and toll-free via the phone, translated into local language, available 24/7. And we have posters that we put up throughout all of our local workplaces in local language to make sure that employees knew that they had an objective and safe outlet should they have a question or a concern. One of the things that was also very important is, in addition to that vital tone at the top from management, was we established responsible personnel and local resources to own good governance. We have a network of professionals around the world that we call local ethics officers. They are primarily senior lawyers in an operation. As we heard from LexisNexis, the legal profession is evolving currently in country. And so actually the Chief Financial Officer of our operations in Myanmar serves as a local ethics officer supported by legal counsel of the company. But she is a resource to ensure that training gets done, to provide advice, answer questions, and really be the arms and legs of our governance and compliance program and bring it to life in the local operation. We've utilized that framework and probably all around the world probably have more than 95 of these local ethics officers embedded in all of our operations who, again, ensure that we walk the talk, so to speak, that our consistent set of governance principles and policies are brought to life and administered in an equal, fair, and consistent manner. Again, in an ongoing operation, one of the things that we've continued to do and will continue to do is monitor and assess how things are going. So we have had, on the workplace rights side and supplier guiding principles side, periodic audits already done, and we'll continue to do that and monitor our progress over time, putting reasonable and relevant management action plans in place and tracking the progress. So for example, that might include an observation early on that things like wastewater treatment are needed and putting a plan in place to build that facility and that capability locally. Also, we have built, I mentioned we did a screen of existing customers and suppliers as part of the onboarding process, but also putting an ongoing process in place to ensure that as our portfolio of partners grows and evolves, that we have the same diligence in making sure that they are not on the sanctioned party list and represent the kinds of organizations that we would want to do business with. And then finally, one of the things that's important is as we put these key controls and compliance protocols in place, it's also just making sure they work the way you think they work. So we will continue to do audits over time and assessments. We will continue to bring new awareness and training tools to the table. But it can be as easy as when I was in country, I made sure that I could call the hotline. I had someone who spoke local language, do a test call and make sure that the language capability of the vendor was strong, that it was easy to access it from a local telephone, and also that the website worked as it should, so that that outlet for a safe and secure reporting opportunity for any questions or concerns to make sure that our policies were working the way we expect was in place and functioning as it does everywhere else in the world. And that's it.
Thank you so much, Arlene, for that comprehensive approach that you're taking to respect and support good governance and the rule of law in Myanmar. Now we're going to turn to Patricia. Patricia, Microjustice for All is a social enterprise. How does Microjustice for All help strengthen the rule of law, and what rationale and opportunities do you see for business to support microjustice in Myanmar and elsewhere?
Okay. Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Ursula. It's very nice to hear about all the activities that everyone is doing in Myanmar so far, and that Global Compact has organized this important seminar. And I hope that microjustice may really contribute in this process of opening up Myanmar. I just will give you a short introduction first. What is microjustice? In short, microjustice is legal service provision for the poor, as microfinance does financial services for the poor. Microjustice actually fills a gap in the international cooperation where legal aid is often restrained to either institutional reform or doing court procedures, mediation, defending human rights people actually, whereas microjustice provides just practical legal solutions and basic needs for the legal empowerment of the poor, enabling them to participate in society. Namely, actually, microjustice is getting civil documentation for people, it's doing the land registration, housing registration, registers businesses, does family law-related procedures for the protection of women and children. Microjustice actually has a more over a bottom-up approach to the rule of law. So it's actually a bottom-up implementation for legal reform, which I will explain you in the next slide, if you can pass that on, please. So in the next, so here you see actually that microjustice works on all levels of society, but it is starting with the people, the citizens actually, where it is assessing the needs of the people, is providing practical legal help, really giving the people a legal solution, giving the people paperwork, is raising awareness about these issues, and is actually implementing the legal framework as it is. That is the starting point. Then actually on the civil society level, microjustice trains young legal professionals to set up legal aid infrastructure within the country. So by setting up a microjustice country organization actually. And then actually at the government level, we have a cooperative approach on legal reform and institutional reform. So we do evidence-based lobbying actually on the basis of the legal cases we initiate. We see what the obstacles are, and then we communicate them to the relevant institutions. And actually on the international level, we get legal expertise and all other relevant expertise, and there's an exchange between all the microjustice country organizations to get the legal system ameliorated. So in the next slide, if you can give that, please, I will explain a little bit how we do that. So the first step is to set up a microjustice country organization according to the legal framework of the country. That is mostly a foundation, it can be an association, it can be a company limited by guarantee. And once this is set up, we do a legal needs assessment, really to get the context. Well, what are the needs of the normal people on the ground, the marginalized people, and what do they have to arrange to be included within the system. So on the basis of the legal needs assessment, there's product development. That's actually we develop standardized legal services in the form of handbooks, forms, etc. And what is special about microjustice is that it is not free legal aid, what it usually is, but people have to pay for the service, an affordable price, but there is a price, because otherwise it's impossible to set up a legal framework forever. So microjustice is not a project. Microjustice is really a program, and with a sustainable goal, actually. And the next step is, of course, the service delivery, and that we do together with the other institutions in the country and the NGOs and MFIs, for microfinance institutions. For example, normally there is a microjustice facilitator sitting in the branch office of a microfinance institution. And lastly, indeed, what I already explained, we, in this way, the bottom-up way, we enhance institutional reform on the basis of the experience and the obstacles encountered in the field. Where have we developed this so far? That is, as you can see, it is we are based in the Netherlands, and we started in the former Yugoslavia after the war, in the post-war rehabilitation. And as you can see, we are Latin America and in Africa. What is the impact of the work? As you can see, we just give you here the example of Bolivia, where we are since 2007. We helped more or less, or more than 70,000 people, and mainly in civil documentation. And what could these people do with this? Actually, 25% used it to get a state pension or family allowance. Many people also needed this for property registration. Many people needed it to get a loan from the or to go to school. So it is needed for everything. The same as with property registration. You need it to be able to invest in your house or to get a loan from a better loan from the bank. So this is just an example, and in any country we could make a table like this of the facts. So I already told that microjustice is implemented always in partnership. Microjustice intervention is actually preconditional. It's a very small thing, a birth certificate or a land registration, but when you don't have it, you have a big problem. And the real issue is what partner is doing. So microfinance gives a loan, but if you don't have your civil registration in order, you can't get a bank account. So simple is it. Like, for example, you see here also that it's linked to sustainable agriculture, in that we are talking to various multinational companies, businesses. I will tell you more about this kind of partnering later, but you can also partner with UNICEF or Plan to have children have access to education, etc. So it's always microjustice works in partnership. So maybe we can have the next slide, please, where you can see like what it means for global business. Actually here, the knife is cutting in two ways. On the one hand, it is very interesting for global business that the rule of law is respected on a grassroots level. That means that all the stakeholders, the suppliers, the farmers, the workers, that they have access to rights, because that provides legal security. Otherwise, multinational corporation doesn't know what it is doing. It is legal insecurity is bad for business. On the other hand, it is very good also if the stakeholders are integrated in the systems through the cooperation, or so that the multinational has actually in the partnership with microjustice helps people to get integrated in the system, which means that they can economically develop, and that again is in interest of the global business. Because they become better consumers, they can consume more. Next slide, please. Actually, in the next slide, I will explain actually what microjustice can do in a partnership with a global business. Actually, in the first place, microjustice will carry out social impact and need assessment in the area of operation, and identify what legal needs of the stakeholders are. On the basis of the legal needs of the stakeholders, especially the ones which are related, which are issues also in cooperation with the global business, microjustice develops the standardized legal services, and sets up a distribution network, and of course they'll do the usual evidence-based lobbying to ameliorate the legal system and to enhance the better accessibility of the institutions. And this, what would it mean in Myanmar? May I please have the next slide? I will try to explain a little bit on that. We haven't been there yet. So the first step would be to do a feasibility study. And how far is it possible to set up microjustice in this time in Myanmar? We have a bit discussed it and read about it, and we think, yes, that it's the right time to open microjustice in Myanmar. There are challenges. So one of the challenges would be to find good people who are good lawyers and who speak English. Luckily, that is just a few of them, one or two. The rest can be local lawyers, because it is a local microjustice organization, Microjustice Myanmar, actually. So the second issue is to get the trust from the institutions. The importance there is just that microjustice is working on technical legal issues. It is, and the importance in this is also that we work with start to work with the mainstream population in the center, and not with the ethnic groups with which there are troubles. And we have understood that actually civil documentation, land and business registration, and all those microjustice issues are really an issue for poorer people in the country and for SMEs. So So we have done the feasibility study. On the basis of the feasibility study, we will set up with partners a legal entity and with people we have found. So that we will do a more detailed legal need assessment, and indeed for the various target groups develop microjustice products together with normally with the existing NGOs, MFIs, possible religious institutions in Myanmar. And I think that with all your experience here, maybe we could enter into some kind of cooperation, and I would please invite you to, that we can have a follow-up to this fantastic seminar, actually, to see if we can set up Microjustice Myanmar together with you. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Patricia. Now we're nearly out of time. Adrienne, did you want to speak about Business for Peace, please?
Sorry. Oh, the business opportunities in Myanmar.
Oh, no, Patricia, sorry, we were just asking our colleague Adrienne Gardez. She was going to mention the Business for Peace program, which is also active in Myanmar. So we're just trying to unmute our colleague Adrienne so she can take the floor. Adrienne.
Yes, can you hear me?
We can, thank you.
Oh, fantastic. Thank you so much, Ursula, for the opportunity to say a few words about Business for Peace. I'm going to be very short because I'm conscious of the time, but I wanted to take the opportunity of this great webinar to just flag to our attention that the Global Compact is now working on a new initiative, which is called Business for Peace. This initiative has been launched by the UN Secretary General in September this year as a way to advance business engagement towards peace. We have seen over the past few years that there's more and more engagement from the business side, and increasing recognition that business success very much depends on thriving societies and stability. And so this platform, Business for Peace, has been designed to promote responsible business in conflict-affected areas and to support Global Compact participants in living up to their commitment to the Global Compact principles, including in high-risk environments. The platform will also seek to stimulate corporate action and partnerships that contribute to peace at the local level, and will be facilitating the sharing of best practices and dialogue, and also increase reporting on actions that corporations are taking in high-risk areas to live up to their commitment to the principles. The approach adopted by this platform is very similar to the one we follow in other issue areas of the Global Compact, meaning that it will be structured around the model of commit, act, and report publicly. But the new feature of this platform is that it will be very much driven by the local level, the local network of the Global Compact, as a way to embed the Global Compact principles in challenging environments. So the unique feature of this platform is that local networks can join the platform and engage their members at the local level in this initiative. I'm not going to say much here because you can find all details about the initiative on our website, but I wanted to flag that here because the Myanmar local network will be engaged in this platform, and I wanted to draw your attention to that. Thank you, Ursula.
Thank you so much, Adrienne, and indeed it is very exciting that there is a Myanmar Global Compact local network, and we also hope to engage them more generally in the area of rule of law and business, working closely with our colleagues that work on issues like business and peace, business and anti-corruption, business and human rights, etc. And as I mentioned earlier, we'll certainly in the coming weeks and months have more information for all of you in relation to this new initiative, that rule of law and business. We haven't had questions come through, and in the interest of time, what I would suggest is if you do have any questions or you'd like to follow up, if you can email us afterwards, and we'd be happy to connect you with the panelists, who I'm sure would also be happy to answer your questions. So with that, I would like to thank so much our panelists for their excellent presentations. We will be circulating the slides from today's presentation to all those who registered for the webinar. And thank you so much for joining from all different time zones around the world. Enjoy the rest of your day. Thank you so much, or evening, I should say. Bye-bye.
Thanks a lot.